Checking the audio. If you are welcome, you're now new to the chat. Welcome. We should be starting in a few minutes. That was copyright music from, and I want to show you where it comes from. That is the song Elektronomia, Summersong 2018 for no copyright tropical house music from Bass Rebels. Should be more descriptions in the VOD when I publish it. So there's that. And we're about to begin right now. It's going to be a short stream. You can see I have my open office document open. We should be able to. I hope you guys can hear me. If you're lurking in the chat, you're more than welcome. We're going to be talking about a few tips that I've come up with over the years when it comes to publishing adventures. You can see this is the Beyond the Crystal Cave, the new module UK1. We're not going to be We're going to be talking about this particular module per se, but stuff from this era that can be translated to, say, 5th edition or other systems. So let us begin. First of all, right now we're in the official 5th edition of Dungeons and Dragons, or maybe you're playing award-winning tabletop RPG Dungeon World, or playing Dragon Age or Fantasy Age, or even a fantasy version of Savage Worlds or other systems. But there's a huge host of published adventures for Dungeons and Dragons and other systems. First party from TSR and Wizards of the Coast, as well as third party. And they represent an aspect of the history of Dungeons and Dragons, which I think is very important. For the first 10 years or so, the way that Dungeons and Dragons and many other RPGs were marketed was through what they used to call modules. Today we call them published, pre-published, or published adventures. And as such, that was a vehicle that was sold to most GMs. We use the term GM because Dungeon Master is very particular Dungeons and Dragons. And essentially, it taught GMs and players to play the game, well, through doing. You could go to a convention, for example, participate in a competition with other players / GMs. By the way, GMs are players, so there's that. And in the process, learn the game itself. Then if you like the module, you would buy, say, the player handbook, maybe Dungeon Master's Guide, and also buy one or more of these modules. And we're going to use the term module throughout the recording and the stream. So the first thing seems pretty obvious, of course, is, and I'm going to highlight it here, read the module. Seems pretty straightforward, of course, but very important. The reason why is that you just sit, you take your module, and regardless of the era, and if you hear background noise, please tell me. That helps. And you just page through it, right? You're just going to read it once. No hurry, no rush. You read through it, and decide whether you want to use it or not. That gives you familiarity with the language, with the style, the theme, etc. Then, and I think this is very important, you take a notepad or you open a document like this one, open Office or Windows, Word, or what have you, wherever you have, you know, something available to you that is reliable, that you take notes easily and you can use during gameplay. Now, obviously, I think the first thing that most people expect in a advice show like this would be to tell you how to translate, for example, to hit armor class, to defense ratings, or modern armor class, that is post third edition armor class and stuff like that. That gets too technical and doesn't really cover the real, what I think are the real hurdles to deal with the situation. Instead, what I would do is that I would swap monsters from the adventure, and this adventure is for levels 4 to 7, the one I showed you earlier. But usually you start with adventures that says something between levels 1 to 3 or level 1 to 5, right? Beginning adventure, we're assuming that you guys are starting or not used to using pre-published or published adventures. Look at your Dungeon Master's Guide, look at your Player's Guide, look at your Monster Manual, and essentially do the swap, right? If it says Orc in the module, you can probably search for an Orc. An Orc is an Orc, an Elf is an Elf, a Skeleton, a Goblin, a Kobold. The reason for it is if you try to do a direct swap, right? If you try to do a one-to-one, okay, this is in this version, hit die means X amount of hit points, but in this other version it's something else and it has a class and stuff like that, you're gonna drive yourself crazy. Traps are a little bit different. Traps tend to have some kind of saving throw. Traps tend to have in the older modules like the one I show you, they tend to have a dice code, say 1d4 or 2d4 or 3d6 for damage, or I think that really is even more useful, a spread. For example, if it's 3d4, it will be described 3/12. That is, you can take from 3 points of damage to 12 points of damage. And I think that's very good idea, and in fact something you could use in any game that has dice code damage and not fixed damage, because it gives you an idea of both the minimums and the maximums your player can take. They say that you start a first level party where the average hit points is around 10 hit points. Assuming that the party's healed up, or it's fresh when they encounter the trap and they make their saving throws, that means that they'll take about 6 hit points if anybody falls in the trap. That anywhere between 3 to 6 points, even 10 hit points, is going to cripple them. If they take maximum damage, they're dead, or at least dying. So that gives you an idea of how lethal this particular trap could be, right? You might want to change that. You might want to spend the spread, like go 1-4, that is 1d4, that sort of thing. As far as saving throws, stuff like that, older modules will have some wording like save versus rods, staves, and wands, or save versus death magic. That can be confusing. Instead, read the description and make a note. Make a note of it and go, okay. And this you should make these notes in your whatever it is that you're making. Say don't so your notepad, your a loose of paper or something. Whatever you're using that is available to you and you can readily recall. And make the substitution, right? Reflex saves, dex checks, that sort of thing. But make sure you're consistent, right? The description of the trap will probably tell you what it is. So that can still be tricky, but I think you can solve a lot of problems by just making the swap. I think in early levels, as you get more used to the types of monsters that your edition has, and you encounter more unusual creatures, it's like, there's this leech undead half dragon godling. Okay, I don't want to use that, but hey, my book has a dragon like demon. Okay, that seems and they're level 11 or something. Okay, I can use that, right? Don't get stuck on that kind of level of detail because you never progress. It will overwhelm you. Now here, it's where things get very interesting. In number 3, I say strip the module of treasure. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Well, here's what you're going to do. Again, you're going to go, this is probably your second or third reading of the module. You're going to go through the module. You're going to read and go like, okay, says here that if you kill this monster, let me give you an example here. Okay, says that if you kill, you find in the Cave of the Mudmen, which is C4, the location, says the thief is wearing leather armor and his pack has similar content to that of the fighter plus a set of thief's tool. His scabbard is also empty. His belt pouch contains 15 silver pieces. He's wearing a gold ring valued 30 gold pieces and a secret compartment in his right boot containing a gem worth 400 gold pieces. Also on his belt is a small scabbard containing a dagger +1. It's a good description of, it's basically someone you encounter in the adventure, which also is important about when it comes to treasure. Anytime you encounter a description like that, you should write it down and mark the location and maybe make a note of any particular thing that jumps at you. Do that for the entire module. The reason you want to do that is there are many reasons you should do that. For example, first of all, it could be either too much treasure. If you're doing an ongoing campaign, none of this applies if you're doing a single shot when it comes to treasure. But if this turns into an ongoing campaign from a single shot, or you're already doing or planning an ongoing campaign, you could have too little or too much treasure. For example, 5th edition compared to past editions, what you might call a low magic edition, because the focus of the designers was to give most of those powers and abilities to the classes and races and the like, and not have the party members sort of be laden with a lot of magical items. Past editions, most of the improvements were minimal and passive. You increase your hit points, you give you a chance to hit, etc. There were some, for example, prestige classes in what I call 3.x, which is 3rd edition, 3.5, Pathfinder, that sort of thing, that can give you some nasty, depending on which side of the spell you were, spell-like abilities and the like, but mostly it was all down to the magical items. So it could be too many if you're playing 5th edition. But say that if you're playing another earlier edition or another system and you grab a published adventure for 5th edition, it may have too little treasure. Maybe you want to load up with treasure, right? Another reason is that these modules, at least the earlier ones, were designed for what I call competition tournament play. And so you wanted to give the players, as they were playing, a sense that they have defeated, when they defeated something difficult, that they had in fact earned the something for it, and just killing the monster. Kind of like when you're playing Diablo or some other fantasy role-playing game, when you kill the monster, you get a ton of gold that jumps out, or a nifty item, right? I guess it solidifies the sense of victory and accomplishment. And often certain magical items or discovering treasure and whatnot could also net you some points as well. Sorry, a bit gassy tonight. The more points you had, the more likely you're going to win the scenario, right? And win the game, and Gen Con or Dragon Con or whatever. Another point is that Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons 1st and 2nd edition had a rule, and it could vary the exact ratios, where you did not only get experience points from killing monsters or defeating them, driving them away, etc., capturing, what have you, but also from the treasure. And not simply gold pieces or jewelry and gems, but from the gold piece value of magical items. So let's say that your +1 sword, magical longsword, costs 1,000 gold pieces. Well, depending on the ratio, let's give it a very generous ratio of 10 to 1. For every 10 gold pieces of treasure that you got from whatever form, you get 1 experience point. You can see that if you want adventure, especially in a single engagement, to at least get 1 or more levels, you would need to generate a lot of experience points. And the best way to do that was not only with monsters, but also with significant amounts of treasure. Yet another problem, and this is what goes into translation from system to system, is that the descriptions and the powers and abilities given in one area don't necessarily match, even if they have the same, same item, supposedly, same name, same ring, sword, armor, etc., don't necessarily match. because they're built for different with different priorities in mind. So, a or an item that could have been very common in one era could be very uncommon, seems very powerful in another, or vice versa. I mentioned in that description that it talks about a thief and a fighter and whatnot. Not only are you going to note the treasure in, say, a den of monsters. When you kill the monsters and you go and you search the den and you got out yourself the treasure, you're also going to note the treasure that any and every single NPC has. Why? Because player characters have a knack of acquiring anything and everything that any NPC has at any one moment. Again, older editions would tend to load up actually higher level characters, NPCs, even though just some guy wandering down the street with tons of magical stuff and money and whatnot. So if, I don't know, this particular NPC tripped and fell, well, you end up with 3 magical swords, 2 pieces of magical armor, 5 rings, 17 amulets, etc. 11 wands. You get the picture, right? Scrolls and all those things. So for all those reasons, and some of the more that I'm skipping right now, you want to strip all the treasure. Oh, another thing is that it can also save you time at the end of the adventure. If your players successfully finish the adventure, at some point they're going to ask for both. They're basically going to say, "Oh, mark C4." That was the room that we're talking about, the area. There's treasure there, and we move on, expecting that at the end of the module, end of the adventure, you're going to give them all the treasure that they had. You can decide not only how much treasure eventually you're going to end up with, it's going to be available to them, but since you already have it copied down, you're like, okay, C4, this is what they have, or whatever you decided to put in, etc., etc. Another thing that came to mind is that often you would get references to tables, to say table EG, right? That's actually 3 or 4 tables. All versions of Dungeons & Dragons and some other games have treasure tables. However, again, what appears in one edition as a table for treasure is not going to be the same happens in the other. And even if you were to choose an item in that table, you had the ability to go and find the original copy of that system, the DMG or what have you, find the treasure, read it, and choose a weapon or what have you. Again, how that magical item or treasure article works in one system may not work the same in other systems once you're using, especially if you're using a completely different game, right? So again, for balance's purpose, which I am a big believer in balance, you should be able to strip it and then decide what you want to do. Now we go to the 4th point, and this one is one that I think is very important, not only for any one published adventure, but for all GMs at any time whenever they create or use NPCs. Dungeons & Dragons has a system of alignments. You're probably well aware of the system of alignments that Dungeons & Dragons has. The original had lawful, neutral, and chaotic. Later, with Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, we had from lawful good to chaotic and evil, the 9 alignments. 4th edition shrunk them to 6. Now we're back to 9 with 5th edition. Alignments are supposed to be shorthand for the general worldview of a given NPC, as well as player characters. But at times they can be too simplistic, they can be too restrictive depending on the system, or they're not good enough to cover all the bases. So instead of thinking in terms about alignment, you should read the description that the module gave to you of the NPC, whatever NPC, not all the NPCs. Don't worry about the spear carriers, right? A barkeep or a farmer, whatever. Just concentrate on the ones that you think are important. With time, you'll also be able to give some kind of personality to the spear carriers and the Greek chorus, but for now, they're not that important. So, important NPCs should be assigned motivations, and the best way I can find to easily break them down. Again, on your notes, go by NPC and say, what is the reason, or why are the reasons that the NPC would be an ally of the player characters? A good reason, and you do it in a single sentence, maybe in a single word, perhaps. That's a clue. You can start with a sentence, and then with experience, you narrow it down. A good reason why the NPC would remain neutral vis-a-vis the player characters, and what reason would they stand in opposition to the player characters. This is distinct from alignment. It goes to the goals, wants, and needs of the NPC. It helps you think of the NPC as someone that stands distinct from the player characters. It's true that no NPC really exists until the player characters meet them, right? They're kind of theoretical. They're fictional, certainly, but theoretical until the players show up and talk to them. Unless you're constantly doing asides where you're doing different voices for different NPCs and that sort of thing, which is useful but could be easily abused. But you have to give them the impression that those NPCs, those non-player characters, the ones that are assigned to you, the GM, have their own motivations. And the best way to do it vis-a-vis the players is to say, okay, under this condition, this character might be a villain, but might seek to ally himself to the goodly, godly paladin that leads the group because they get some kind of advantage around it. So that might be someone who might be unwilling perhaps, or unlikely ally, but an ally nonetheless, even if it's temporary. I suggest most people would remain neutral because the idea of heavily armored characters with strange abilities and even stranger backgrounds would scare people enough that they would not say, you know what, I don't know, I don't want to mess with these people, so I'm just gonna let them be. I'm not gonna antagonize them. That's another word for a position. I want the third point, or ally myself with them, right? Also, but if the PCs do something right, they might motivate people to shift, right? That's another thing. Is that you can have people that can shift. Having the three options means that if the NPCs do X, Y, or C, or say X, Y, and Z, they could shift someone who's from neutral into an ally to neutrality, or from an ally to an opposition to them, right? An antagonist. Let me write that here, right? Antagonist. Yeah, and highlight it once again so you guys know what it is. Finally, of course, is the question of why someone would be antagonist or stand in opposition to the player characters. You could have someone that could share the alignment and general worldview of a PC or the PCs in general, but they have their own goals and their own faults, etc., which means that they could clash with them. It could be an ideological clash. It could be a clash of goals, right? You could have the local parish priest sees the incoming paladin as either a braggart or someone that challenges their position and authority in the parish, and they're like, I'm not going to cooperate with this guy, right? These are the kind of guys that come in, they flash their swords, they throw money around, they give pretty speeches, and then they're off the door, right? So while one would think naturally they could be allies, it may take some work for the PCs to get them on their side, or move them from at least neutrality, or they might actively impede the PC stance. It may not make sense to the player characters, or it may not even make sense to a third party, like say viewers on a Roll20 show or something like that. But it should make sense for the NPC. The cool thing about this is that the more you use this little system, the more it becomes second nature to you. And you don't even have to think of the three things. You're like, oh, players say this, well, this character is going to be angry about it, or they're going to ignore it, or they're going to be motivated by it, and on and on and on. Right. The final point, and the fifth point here, we're close to, it's being a pretty short stream. I thought it was going to be longer. would be to use a module as a source book. What do we mean by that? Okay, you read the module, it's like, oh, this is, you read it, and you're like, oh, blah, 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 and there's maps and the points, and you're like, they take charm, and I don't have that spell, and this monster and this armor class A movement. It's an MB15 HD. You know what? Forget it. This. It sounded like a great idea. I heard a ton of things about this module, but I couldn't. I either found a modern version of it, or what's too much work. And I listened to that guy on Twitch, and his ideas weren't pretty cool. So you know what? I don't care. I'm sorry. I'm not gonna use this. I'm not gonna run this. Or maybe you do. You run the adventure, and it goes well, and if people like it, and you go to the next one, and the next one. What do you do with that old book that you have, right? You can hand it. You can put it on eBay, or you can say, you know what? This stuff has a lot of maps. I could use these maps in my own adventures. I could recycle some stuff. There's a great list of monsters here, a great list of NPCs, especially NPC names. Hey, next game I'm gonna run is gonna be Shadowrun game, which is urban fantasy meets cyberpunk. That elven lord is gonna be the the big bad villain against the player characters. Oh, well, he's the kind of guy who has a lot of money and is so old-fashioned that he might build a castle from the old country, stone by stone, from from the Rhine all the way to, say, the outskirts of Seattle. Well, I don't have any maps about castles in Shadowrun, but wait, I got 5 published adventures from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I can take that, and if I can find a castle there or a village or something, I can use that, right? I can use a minor NPC as a butler or something like that, right? So even if you don't actually use the book, or it's too much trouble for you to convert the information there to your system or your edition, you can still use them as source books for names, places, ideas, etc. So that's my take on how you should approach this subject, how to convert or adapt published adventures to play. If you have any ideas, you can always drop them on the chat, of course, and the VOD will be on Twitch and also be on YouTube on Lessons Learned. So as always, thank you for listening, and I hope you have a great time. Good night.